When the envelope arrived, thick and gleaming with golden edges, Lily Dawson thought it was a mistake. She had just finished scrubbing the marble entryway of the Ashcroft estate when the butler handed it to her with an amused smirk. "Looks like someone thinks you're on the guest list," he chuckled before turning on his polished heel. The letter was real, an invitation to the Ashcroft annual charity gala, the grandest event of the season. Lily had dusted chandeliers and vacuumed floors in preparation for that party for 7 years. But no one had ever asked her to attend. Until now. It didn't take long for Lily to realize it wasn't an act of kindness. Word spread among the staff and trickled up through the social cracks of the elite. A few of the younger Ashcrofts laughed openly. "What will she wear, a Dollar Tree gown?" joked Olivia Ashcroft, daughter of the host. "She'll probably show up in her work shoes," snickered her cousin Daniel. They didn't think she'd have the nerve. They expected her to stay home, embarrassed, maybe even tear up the invitation and forget it happened. But Lily had grown up surviving people like them. Raised in a trailer park by a single father who worked graveyard shifts, she knew how to take cruelty and turn it into fuel. She took the bus home that night, the envelope pressed flat between her hands like it was sacred. Her daughter, Maddie, was already at the kitchen table doing homework, a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich beside her. "What's that?" Maddie asked, her eyes lighting up. "An invitation," Lily replied softly. "To the gala. The one I clean for every year." Maddie's brows furrowed. "Did they mean to?" Lily hesitated. "Yes, but not in the way you think." She didn't explain further. She just looked at the dress hanging in the back of her closet, a dress she hadn't touched in 12 years. It had once belonged to her late sister, Grace, a seamstress who died too young. Lily had kept it not just for the memory, but for the day she'd need to remind the world who she really was. The night of the gala arrived with a clear sky and a full moon that bathed the estate in silver light. Luxury cars lined the circle driveway, each one gleaming under the chandeliers strung from the trees. Guests in tuxedos and silk gowns swept past the velvet ropes, offering their names to attendants who pretended not to judge. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with classical music, clinking glasses, and conversations dipped in superiority. Olivia Ashcroft was already tipsy, surrounded by friends. "Do you think she'll come?" one girl giggled. "If she does," Olivia said, "I'll die of second-hand embarrassment." But then the doorman's posture changed, his expression faltering as he stared toward the entryway. Lily stood at the top of the grand stairs in Grace's dress, a fitted navy blue gown with delicate lace sleeves and a neckline that whispered elegance. Her hair was swept into a soft chignon, and her only accessory was a vintage brooch passed down from her grandmother. She descended the staircase slowly, each step deliberate, her eyes calm, her spine straight. The room fell silent, not out of mockery but confusion. Who was this woman walking like royalty through a crowd that had called her invisible? Whispers began. "Is that? It can't be, that's the cleaning lady?" And yet no one laughed. Not this time. Lily's heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she crossed the ballroom, each step slicing through the thick wall of disbelief. At the far end of the room, Henry Ashcroft, the millionaire host and patriarch of the family, stood frozen with a whiskey glass in hand. His jaw visibly tightened when he recognized her. This wasn't the quiet, uniformed woman he passed by without a second glance. This was someone else entirely. Regal, composed, unshakable. Olivia stared, her mouth slightly open, as if trying to process how her joke had backfired into cinematic drama. Henry recovered first, setting his drink on a tray and striding toward her with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ms. Dawson," he said smoothly, "what a surprise." Lily tilted her head slightly, her voice steady. "Mr. Ashcroft, thank you for the invitation." The corners of his mouth twitched. "We sent it, in good fun." Lily nodded, the softness in her expression not to be mistaken for naivety. "I figured that much. That's why I thought it would be even more fun if I actually showed up." Behind them, guests were already pulling out their phones, pretending to check messages but really capturing her entrance. She moved through the crowd, accepting a glass of water from a passing server with grace, ignoring the staring eyes that tried to make sense of what they were seeing. She made her way to the main reception area where she paused to examine one of the gala's charity displays, framed photographs of community programs the Ashcrofts supposedly supported. Lily leaned in to read the plaque. Funded by the Ashcroft Foundation for Urban Renewal. She gave a soft hum. Urban renewal, huh? The words felt empty compared to the neglect she'd seen in her own neighborhood, a place the Ashcrofts likely couldn't find on a map. Daniel, Olivia's cousin and the first to mock her in the staff kitchen, approached next. "You clean up well," he said with a smirk that couldn't quite mask his discomfort. "So do lies when dressed in philanthropy," Lily replied calmly, her gaze never wavering. "Excuse me?" he asked, the smirk faltering. "This whole event," she gestured around the room, "is about image. But images can't hide truth. You invited me thinking I'd be humiliated. But all I did was walk in and you don't know where to look." She turned and left him standing there, blinking. As the string quartet paused between songs, Olivia clinked her champagne glass to draw attention. "Everyone, let's raise a toast to our most unexpected guest, Lily Dawson," she called out, voice syrupy and condescending. "May your mop always glisten as much as that dress." Laughter bubbled, uncertain and awkward. Lily turned to face the room. Her face didn't harden. Her shoulders didn't tense. Instead she smiled. "Thank you, Olivia. And may your future be as polished as the lies printed in your family's tax returns." The crowd gasped audibly. Olivia flushed crimson. And in that moment the game changed. The room hovered in stunned silence, the kind that follows a crack of thunder. Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Henry Ashcroft narrowed his eyes, but he didn't move. It was as if the very walls of the ballroom had stopped breathing. Then, from the corner of the room, the MC stepped up to the microphone, eager to restore control. "And now, if we could turn our attention to our featured community story segment, where we spotlight someone who's made an impact in our city." His voice trailed off as he read the name on the card. "Lily Dawson." Henry shot a sharp look toward the MC. The young man shrugged helplessly. "It was requested by the foundation committee. The board voted this morning." The spotlight turned toward Lily. For a second, the ballroom didn't know what to do. But Lily stepped forward without hesitation, her gown sweeping the floor like midnight silk. She walked up the small stage, took the mic and scanned the crowd. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and steady. "Good evening. I was told this segment was about community heroes. I'm honored, but I'm no hero. I'm a woman who saw an open door and chose not to wait for someone else to walk through it. I've worked at the Ashcroft estate for 7 years," she continued. "I've scrubbed the marble many of you stepped over without a glance. I've cleaned lipstick stains off wine glasses you left behind. I've smiled when no one spoke to me and stayed quiet when whispers floated through the halls about how people like me didn't belong." Heads dropped. Eyes shifted. A few guests cleared their throats or looked down into their drinks. "But I've also raised a daughter. I've taught her dignity, hard work, and that her worth will never be measured by who she serves, but by how she stands." She paused, scanning the room again. "Tonight, I wore a dress stitched by my late sister, Grace. She was never invited to a gala. But she had hands that worked magic even when they were cracked and tired. So I stand here for her. For every woman who's dusted these floors, packed your hors d'oeuvres, ironed your linens. I didn't come to shame you, I came to remind you that the people you pretend not to see are the ones holding everything up." A silence fell over the crowd, not of guilt alone but of realization. Then she smiled gently, her voice warming. "You thought inviting me would be funny. You were right. But the punchline? It's not mine." She stepped down from the stage as applause slowly erupted, not forced, not performative, but real. Daniel clapped. Then Lucinda, the foundation's head. Then others followed, some rising to their feet. Olivia stood frozen, arms stiff at her side. And Henry Ashcroft? He remained still, stone-faced, as if the applause chipped away at something too long untouched. As the applause settled into murmurs and whispers, a woman from the far end of the ballroom made her way toward Lily. Tall, composed, dressed in an emerald green gown, she extended her hand with a firm, respectful grip. "Vanessa Reinhardt," she said. "Director of the Eastern Arts and Community Trust." Lily nodded politely, unfamiliar with the name. Vanessa leaned in slightly. "Your sister's dress design, it's exquisite. And your story? Even more so. We sponsor new designers rooted in legacy and working-class tradition. I'd like to fund an exhibit in Grace's honor, if you're willing to help curate it." Lily blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "You want to honor my sister?" Vanessa smiled. "I want the world to see what you just showed us. That beauty doesn't come from privilege. It comes from hands like hers. Like yours." Around them, a few reporters began inching closer, sensing something newsworthy in this unexpected twist. Olivia Ashcroft, watching from across the room, looked as though someone had replaced her champagne with vinegar. Daniel raised a glass in silent acknowledgement. For the first time in his life he looked at Lily as a peer. Before Lily could answer, another voice chimed in. "I'll match the funding," said Theodore Vance, a renowned entrepreneur whose name graced hospitals and libraries. "We talk about charity, but she just showed us what it looks like to live it." Murmurs turned to renewed applause. Lily's hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't falter. "Thank you," she said. "If we're going to tell her story, we'll also tell the stories of the women who stood beside her. The ones still dusting, folding, and carrying far more than laundry." Henry Ashcroft, silent until now, stepped forward at last. "Enough," he muttered. The crowd hushed. This evening was meant to be about our foundation. About the Ashcroft legacy. Lily turned to face him, her expression cool but calm. "Then maybe it's time to re-examine what your legacy really is." Henry's jaw clenched. "You were staff." "I still am," she replied. "But now the whole room sees me. And that's what scares you." He looked away, defeated by something heavier than pride, truth. Lily didn't linger for victory. She took Maddie's hand, who had arrived quietly near the end, and the two walked out of the ballroom together. The night air was crisp, the moon still high. Reporters called out, guests watched from the windows, but Lily didn't turn around. She had done what she came to do, and something even greater. Not just to walk in like royalty, but to leave with her dignity multiplied and her sister's name destined to outlive the marble halls where it had never been spoken. By morning, Lily's speech was all over social media. A guest had filmed her walk down the grand staircase, and another had captured every word of her address. The video, titled, "The Maid Who Shook the Gala," amassed millions of views within 24 hours. News anchors debated its impact, fashion bloggers marveled at the craftsmanship of Grace's dress, and civil groups hailed Lily as a voice for underappreciated workers. She turned off her phone after a while, overwhelmed but steady. "I didn't do it to go viral," she told Maddie over coffee. "I did it so the next girl like me doesn't have to keep her head down." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Vanessa Reinhardt followed through on her promise. Grace's dresses were carefully unpacked and restored, displayed in a traveling exhibit titled Threaded Legacy. Lily contributed stories, photos, and journal entries from Grace's short but powerful life. The exhibit opened at the Eastern Cultural Museum and drew lines around the block. A panel discussion followed, led by Lily and moderated by women from cleaning unions, seamstress guilds, and working-class advocacy groups. It wasn't just art, it was reclamation. She began speaking at universities, galas, and labor summits. Her voice, once unheard in the halls she cleaned, now echoed in auditoriums packed with students and leaders. "The people you pass without seeing are often the ones carrying the weight of your world," she said in one keynote speech. "It's time we lift the ones who've spent their lives holding others up." Lily didn't preach. She didn't grandstand. She spoke plainly, powerfully, like someone who had lived the truth she spoke, and that made all the difference. Meanwhile, Maddie launched a scholarship fund in Grace's name. "I don't want her to just be remembered," she said. "I want her to open doors." The first recipients were 3 young women studying fashion design while working part-time jobs to support their families. Lily mentored them, teaching both skills and pride. "Your work isn't just fabric," she told them. "It's memory, it's voice, it's legacy." She never let them forget where beauty came from, not from money but from meaning. A year after the gala, Lily returned to the Ashcroft estate, not as staff, but as a guest speaker for a rebranded foundation event now focused on equity and recognition for underrepresented labor. Henry Ashcroft was no longer at the helm. Olivia, to her credit, had stepped back from her entitled past and extended an olive branch. "I didn't know how blind I was," she admitted. "But I want to do better." Lily didn't forget the past, but she accepted the apology with grace. "Change begins with acknowledgement," she said. "Let's build from there." Lily used the momentum not for herself, but to build something lasting. She launched the Grace Network, a national coalition focused on empowering working-class women through mentorship, legal resources, and microgrants. The goal was simple but revolutionary: to ensure no woman who cleaned, cooked, folded, or served ever felt invisible again. Within months, local chapters sprang up in over a dozen states. Former hotel maids, cafeteria workers, and factory line women began organizing workshops, telling their stories, and lifting one another into the spotlight where they'd always belonged. The network partnered with labor unions, fashion schools, and domestic worker associations. They offered financial literacy courses, workplace rights training, and creative expression programs. Lily visited each chapter she could, often arriving quietly, listening more than speaking. "I don't want a statue," she told one group in Detroit. "I want systems that remember women like my sister. Women like you." At every stop, she brought one item with her, Grace's original dress. It became more than a garment, it was a symbol, revered and remembered. With time, national news outlets caught on again. Time magazine featured her on the cover under the headline, "The Cleaner Who Redefined Class." The accompanying article praised her not only for her poise and courage but for her long-term commitment to transformation. She was invited to Washington, D.C. to speak on labor policy reform. Standing before lawmakers, she said, "We don't want charity. We want recognition, compensation, and respect. And we want our daughters to inherit dignity, not struggle." The room rose to its feet. Behind the scenes, Lily stayed grounded. She still lived in the same modest home, still wore her sister's brooch when attending public events, and still spent Sunday afternoons in the community garden with Maddie. Fame never diluted her purpose. She once told a reporter, "All the applause in the world means nothing if you stop seeing the people still sweeping the floors." Her humility made her impact even greater. She wasn't trying to be an icon. She was trying to be a mirror, for others to see themselves and rise. Then came the call from the Smithsonian. They wanted to acquire Grace's dress as part of a new exhibit titled, "American Women Who Moved the Needle." Lily hesitated. She clutched the gown as if it were her sister's hand. But then she said, "Yes. Let the world see what love stitched together." The dress was placed beside items from civil rights leaders, pioneering scientists, and cultural changemakers. Visitors came from across the world. And somewhere among them, young girls stared at that dress, whispering dreams their grandmothers once believed were impossible. Years passed. The world continued to spin, and the Grace Network grew into a movement that outlived headlines and hashtags. Lily, now in her early 60s, transitioned out of public appearances. She spent more time mentoring quietly and gardening with Maddie, who had become a full-time educator and advocate. Life slowed down, but the letters never stopped. They came from women across the country, maids, single mothers, immigrant workers, daughters of seamstresses. Each one a thank you. Each one a reminder that her story had become theirs too. One letter arrived on a rainy Monday that made Lily stop everything. It was from a teenage girl named Delilah in rural Kentucky. "I saw your story in school," it began in neat handwriting. "My mama cleans houses and I used to be ashamed of that. But then I saw you in that dress. I watched how you walked like you were supposed to be there. And I realized I've been walking like I didn't deserve anything. I'm changing that now." Delilah enclosed a drawing of a dress she wanted to make someday, her own design. Lily pressed the letter to her heart. Lily invited Delilah to visit the city for a weekend, and the young girl arrived wide-eyed and full of questions. She wore a handmade skirt stitched from old curtains, and her voice cracked when she said, "I want to be like you." Lily shook her head with a warm smile. "No, sweetheart. You'll be better." Together, they visited the Smithsonian, standing silently before Grace's dress. Delilah whispered, "It's even more beautiful up close." Lily's eyes glistened. "That's because you know what it's made of now." That night, Delilah and Lily sat on the porch watching the stars. "Was it scary?" Delilah asked. "Walking into that gala?" Lily took a slow breath. "Terrifying. But the fear wasn't about them. It was about whether I could carry all the women who came before me. I didn't want to let them down." Delilah nodded. "You didn't." Lily placed a hand over hers. "Now it's your turn to carry them forward." The torch had been passed, not in a speech, not in a ceremony, but in a moment between a girl and a woman who once scrubbed marble for people who never said her name. Delilah went home changed. She started a sewing collective with her mother. She applied for scholarships through the Grace Network and got accepted into a design program. Her first collection? Mop to Majesty, a tribute to women like Lily. When it debuted at a regional fashion show, one of the judges, Vanessa Reinhardt, recognized the story behind it and stood in applause before the runway walk even ended. The legacy had not only continued, it had evolved, stretched, and flourished in soil once considered too poor to grow anything. On the 10th anniversary of the fateful gala, Lily received another invitation, this time from Olivia Ashcroft herself. The envelope was handwritten, sealed in deep violet wax. "I know now what that night meant. I know what I did. And I know who you are. Please return not as a guest but as the guest of honor." Lily held the letter for a long time before answering. Not out of hesitation, but reflection. Some doors you walk through to make a statement. Others you return to for closure. The Ashcroft estate had changed. New staff had health benefits, college tuition programs, and a direct line to the board. The gala was now co-hosted by the Grace Network. Gone were the empty gestures of philanthropy. In their place were real stories, real initiatives, real community. When Lily arrived, there were no stares, only warmth. No whispers, only praise. She wore a new dress that night, co-designed by Delilah, but she pinned Grace's brooch over her heart, just as she always had. Olivia greeted her at the door with tears in her eyes and no words. Lily hugged her. We all grow when we choose to see. The ballroom shimmered that night, not from excess but intention. Young women from the network walked the runway wearing their own designs, narrating the meaning behind each piece. Lily sat front row, her eyes wide with pride, her soul full. During the closing speech, Olivia handed the microphone to her. Lily stood slowly and the room quieted, not out of expectation but reverence. I came here once to survive mockery, she began. Tonight, I return not for applause, but because every young woman deserves to see that where you start isn't where you must stay. I don't want to be remembered for walking downstairs in a pretty dress, she continued. I want to be remembered for reminding a room full of power that dignity walks among them daily, disguised as those they ignore. Applause followed, but Lily simply nodded, then stepped down, returning to her seat without fanfare. She didn't need it. The legacy was already written in the eyes of every girl in the room, every woman who stood taller because of her story, and every person who now made space instead of taking it. After the gala, Lily stood alone outside, staring up at the stars just as she had all those years ago. The wind was soft, the night still. Maddie approached, placing a shawl over her shoulders. You good? She asked. Lily smiled. I'm home. The house behind her was no longer a monument to exclusion. It had become a cathedral of redemption. She didn't need to own it. She had transformed it. Not with wealth or fame but by stepping into her own worth, and showing the world how to recognize theirs. The following spring, Lily retired from public work completely. Not out of exhaustion but fulfillment. I planted what I needed to, she told Maddie. Now let it grow. She moved to a quiet cottage just outside the city, surrounded by lavender and honeysuckle, with a sewing room that overlooked the garden. She still received letters, always handwritten, from girls who had started design schools, advocacy programs, or simply learned to stand up for themselves at work. She kept every one in a carved wooden box labeled Proof. Tanaya, one of her early ments and now a rising leader in the Grace Network, came to visit one weekend with big news. We're opening our first international chapter, she said excitedly. In Nairobi. A women's collective there asked to join under your name. Lily's eyes welled with tears. Grace would be laughing, she whispered. We didn't even think our work would reach beyond our street. Now it's crossing oceans. Tanaya handed her a small piece of fabric. Their lead designer made this for you. It was a patchwork square, deep blue with white embroidery that read, You showed us how to walk in. Years passed peacefully. Maddie had a daughter of her own and named her Grace. Lily became a grandmother, the kind who stitched handmade dolls and baked bread on Sundays. She never missed a school recital or a community fundraiser. Every so often, someone would stop her at the grocery store. You're her, right? They'd ask. The one in the blue dress? Lily would smile and nod. Yes. But I'm more proud of what happened after the dress. That was her favorite part, the after. That's where the real story lived. As Lily's health began to decline, she wrote letters for her granddaughter to open on birthdays, graduations, and hard days. One read, When the world seems heavy, remember, someone already cracked the marble floor for you. You don't need permission to rise. You are already standing on permission made flesh. Another read, The world will always try to seek you at the back. Walk to the front, kindly, confidently, and take your place. She tucked them away with the brooch and a photo of her sister's dress, ensuring Grace would never forget where her roots ran deep. Lily passed peacefully, surrounded by family, flowers, and the hum of her granddaughter softly singing while brushing her hair. The world mourned her like a queen. Not with a state funeral, but with moments of silent acknowledgement in sewing rooms, picket lines, and after-hour shift circles where women told each other, You matter. You always did. At her memorial, Tanaya spoke last. She didn't just RSVP to a gala, she said through tears. She RSVP'd to history. And in doing so, she opened the door for all of us to walk through with our heads held high. In the years following Lily's passing, her legacy only grew. Every March, on the anniversary of the gala, the Grace Network hosted an international day of recognition called Walk-In Day. Across dozens of cities and towns, women wore shades of navy blue and lace in honor of Lily and Grace. But it wasn't just about fashion, it was about courage. Workers walked into rooms they once felt unwelcome in, city halls, courtrooms, banks, board meetings. Each step a defiant echo of Lily's. Each entrance a reminder that dignity has no uniform. In Nairobi, the chapter Lily helped inspire unveiled a community center called the House of Grace. It offered free tailoring classes, childcare, and business training for women starting from scratch. On opening day, a wall mural was revealed, Lily in her sister's dress, walking forward with her hand extended behind her, lifting someone else up. Underneath, the words, "We rise when we are seen. We lead when we are believed." Women wept beneath it, touching the wall as if to absorb her strength. Grace, Lily's granddaughter, eventually followed her grandmother's footsteps, not into cleaning but into curation. She became a museum director, overseeing historical exhibits on labor, migration, and women's resistance. The Smithsonian asked her to curate a retrospective titled, "The Dress That Changed the Room." She included not only her great-aunt's original gown but also uniforms worn by nannies, field workers, and food servers, all elevated behind glass with stories beside them. "This," she said at the opening, "is not a story of fashion. It's a story of transformation." Educators began teaching Lily's story in classrooms alongside Rosa Parks and Dolores Huerta. Her name appeared in textbooks, her quotes engraved into school walls. One quote in particular became a mantra: "You don't need an invitation to matter. You just need the courage to walk in." A small children's book was written and translated into 10 languages. In one classroom in Louisiana, a young girl traced Lily's name with her finger and whispered, "She looks like my mom." That's how Lily was remembered, not as an icon, but as someone personal, someone real. The Grace Network became a global nonprofit, spanning 41 countries. Tanaya remained its president until she passed the torch to the next generation. Women who had once needed the network to survive and now led it to thrive. Every chapter kept a framed photo of Lily in the lobby, standing on those marble stairs, wearing her sister's dress. Not looking down. Not asking permission. Just walking forward. That image became timeless, not because it captured beauty, but because it captured power. Years after her passing, a little girl named Elena visited the Smithsonian with her mother. They stopped at the exhibit titled, "The Dress That Changed the Room." Elena stared at the gown behind the glass, navy blue with lace sleeves, delicate but bold. "Was she a princess?" she asked. Her mother knelt beside her. "No, baby. She was a cleaning lady." Elena blinked. "But why is her dress here?" Her mother smiled. "Because she didn't wait for someone to give her worth. She walked in and reminded everyone she already had it." Outside the museum, a group of seamstresses were gathering to host a free tailoring clinic for underpaid workers. They wore pins shaped like brooms with roses entwined, Lily's symbol. As they stitched fabric under the afternoon sun, one of them said softly, "She never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to be seen." And in that seeing, Lily had offered a map, a way for women to rise without abandoning where they came from. Maddie, now older and mentoring others herself, often visited schools to read Lily's children's book aloud. She always ended with the same message: "Your story may not start in a castle. It may start in a closet or a laundromat or a kitchen. But never let the world convince you it doesn't belong in the light." And then she'd hold up a small brooch and whisper, "This belonged to a woman who cleaned floors, but her name now hangs in halls of power. Don't ever forget that." One day, a new student asked her, "Did Lily ever get scared?" Maddie smiled and nodded. "All the time. But she walked in anyway. And when you're afraid and walk in anyway, that's called courage." The student leaned back thoughtful. "Then I think I want to walk in too." That moment, as quiet as a breath, was Lily's legacy taking root in someone new. Not because of fame or fanfare, but because her life had become a blueprint for boldness. So the story lives on, not just in marble staircases and award-winning speeches, but in thread and soil and quiet bravery. In every woman who dares to RSVP to a world that never expected her. In every child who lifts their chin a little higher because someone before them walked with grace. And in every soul who remembers, you don't need riches to look like royalty, you just need to carry the truth of your worth like a crown.